There you go. Awesome.
Yep.
Thanks so much. So we'll get started.
All right. So, welcome everyone. I'm Alexandra Pickett, the Director of Online Teaching at SUNY Online, and we're very, very pleased to have Dr. Nikki Childrose here to talk with us about AI and assessment. Dr. Childrose currently serves as Associate Professor of History, Technical Professions Division Chair, and Academic Assessment Coordinator at Columbia Green Community College. Dr. Childrose is a staunch advocate for student-centered teaching and learning. Her journey began as a high school social studies teacher and has since evolved into a visionary leader, reshaping educational paradigms through innovative assessment practices and transformative pedagogy. She's a member and former chair of the SUNY Council on Assessment and a past board member of ANNY. She continues to mentor educators and shape assessment practices on a larger scale. Dr. Childrose is also our 2017 SUNY Online Teaching Ambassador. Welcome, Nikki. It's so nice to have you here. Welcome to everyone who came to have their lunch with us. If you wouldn't mind introducing yourselves in the chat, who you are, your institution, what your role is, what your interest in AI and assessment is, and then we can, kind of see who we can all see who's in the room with us. Welcome, Dr. Childrose. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. It's really great to be here, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right. And I definitely don't have the cool avatar, so it's just me, and I really wanted to try that out, but I didn't want to break anything. So I'll just jump right in. Always a really humbling introduction. I am really excited actually to present on this topic as a continuation of a SUNY Council on Assessment panel discussion that we had earlier this academic year in the fall. Actually, Kirk Jones from SUNY Canton and I facilitated what was a really well-attended, very just information-loaded session with actual AI experts. And I don't want to claim that I am at all that, but what we've sort of promised is that throughout the rest of the academic year, we would try to take bits and pieces of what was covered in that, super informative panel and kind of just give you some bite-sized in practice, what's happening on campuses and across the system in real time after that. So that's what I'm excited to talk to you about today, share some stories of what's going on, what I'm seeing, especially in the teaching and learning space. So, and I'll definitely save some time at the end so we can have discussion and, post ideas in the chat, and we'll try to cover as much ground as possible. And I will share the slides also at the end. So again, as previously discussed, I really want to see faculty in the driver's seat when it comes to deploying new technologies in their classrooms. I think classrooms are the space where we can find freedom and empower students to embrace information literacy specific to our content and all of the things. So when I was in that panel discussion as a participant facilitator myself, I of course was thinking about my own classroom. I teach history and political science at a small rural community college. And while my class sizes aren't huge, they're very diverse, and I teach many sections, so that's always a consideration. And in the work that I do with faculty as assessment coordinator, it's really great because I get to see across disciplines, what faculty are trying to do to improve things like equitable outcomes in their courses and just generally stay on trend or keep ahead of the curve when it comes to technology. So, these are just some objectives that, I'll speak to in today's presentation a little bit, and also just how since fall to now, integrating AI in my own courses and with my colleagues has actually led to some positive outcomes. So I think it's always important to just define what we're actually talking about. And I'm gonna kind of go back old school, pretty basic, to Linda Susski's definition of assessment. This is a definition I return to all the time. We have a handbook about it at our college when onboarding faculty, but I just think it still is so true today. Even in the changing landscape of higher ed, that as we think about assessment, it really is this ongoing, iterative, continuous process of, in this case, student learning outcomes, which is really what we're going to focus on. And of course, assessment can encompass so many things. Prior to working with faculty, I worked on the functional area side, thinking more about institutional effectiveness and those areas, but specific to today, really just thinking more about teaching and learning and being in that space. So on the other side of what we're talking about today with regard to AI, really thinking about the AI brain. And AI encompasses many technologies. It kind of makes me a little bit nostalgic to think about how long AI has actually sort of existed in various forms, which I'll speak to in a bit. But for this presentation, again, just really applying this to key tasks that we do, like grading, the provision of feedback, analysis of data in our courses. And specific to this, I'm really going to be talking mostly about generative AI. That was one of the pieces of our panel discussion, was kind of thinking about all the different areas and aspects of what AI can do for us. But when it comes to generative AI, I think that I kind of came from a place like a little bit thinking about my own classroom as a threat, like how this was threatening like my classes or student learning in my classes. And then I started just thinking about like the essence of my teaching and really reflecting this semester on all of those pieces. So I'll kind of kick off that discussion, or where I'm coming from, with a story that took me sort of out of the classroom to a conference that I participated in, which sort of changed the trajectory of my thinking. So all of that being said, also be talking a little bit more about the impacts specifically, and there's so many impacts that are dynamic and evolving, but I really want to talk today about efficiency, because like so many of you, there's just so many tasks coming at me as an educator, my faculty colleagues. So we've been really trying to explore how to use AI to streamline our assessment processes. Again, specifically with things like tools like ChatGPT and generative AI, to just develop basic things like student learning outcomes, more customized assignments, even when it comes to assignments that we already have existing, making better instructions, making better rubrics. All of those things allow instructors to focus more on teaching and mentoring and engaging with students. And on the assessment side, I've seen how AI is enabling new assessment methods that I think are innovative, but also essential as we think about refining our curriculum and making updates to courses and programs. So things like simulations, virtual reality scenarios, and more interactive exercises. And, you know, just to be truthful, at the community college, we don't have big budgets. I was actually telling Erin when I jumped on to today's session a little bit early that we're just taking the time over the summer to develop our Center for Teaching and Learning, which has really been decentralized in different committees doing this work. So it's really grassroots and really organic. But I think that our story might just inspire some of the great work that you're doing at other campuses as well. So, obviously you're educators, you're on pulse with what's going on in the news, but I have to tell you, I kind of felt like a teacup just being poured information in like through a fire hose with the start of fall semester with this, just my social media feeds and the news stories. And I started, kind of again in a negative place till I sort of reframed thinking about how I could use this technology, like any other technology, to focus more on my teaching and empowering other faculty to do the same. So I just highlighted a few articles in this presentation that I found as helpful reads. This one in particular, more in the news and more in the literature, on communications of ACM, calling for all of us really to think about updated pedagogical strategies, focusing on new skill sets. And in another slide, I'm actually going to be sharing Bloom's framework that can help us sort of look at existing assignments and activities and learning outcomes, skill sets that could clue us into what to revise, what to review, and even when, and how to prioritize all of that work. Just thinking about how AI can automate our way into jobs to let us once again focus on the important and meaningful parts. These are sort of the bits of information that I was marinating on a lot as I was thinking about my practice and my work in a few key areas this semester. And like any, IE or assessment geek, I was kind of doing a SWOT. I was doing that environmental scan. I was thinking of benefits, challenges, all of those things. And in the end, I honestly found myself sort of here thinking about the future and sort of being on this balance between utopia and dystopia. So I would be like really curious to, hear your thoughts in the chat about this academic year and sort of where you were on the balance scales in comparison to, my perspective, my frame of reference. So to get out of that middle ground space, which feels kind of murky and muddy, I thankfully had the opportunity to go to a conference where all great things happen. So the conference that sort of changed my perspective was Achieving the Dream, Rural Resiliency, which took me out of New York State to Maryland, where I spent a few days, I think it was a 4-day conference, connecting with other and universities who were selected to be part of a rural resiliency cohort. So it was probably about 50 campuses overall, some that did this in the past and some that were newer, like Columbia Green. And we were thinking about two major things, one being the future of work, and second, equitable outcomes and student success. Those were the two major themes. And this really combined with an initiative that we're doing at Columbia Green on digital equity. So I was thrilled to be there. And when you go to this conference, you have an opportunity to stay at University of Maryland Global's accommodations, their hotel. And I have to tell you that it took me all of the 3 days to figure out all of the technology that was even in the room. And so here were the friendly colleagues that I got to spend what was supposed to be 5 hours, 35 minutes on the train from Penn Station to Maryland with, which ended up being an 8-hour journey. And it was sort of like this was the train ride. I was sitting backward in a less than ideal seating situation, and we're trying to be really good workers, answering emails, catching up on some grading, and the conversation turned to something else. And the conversation turned to my colleague. I'll just back up a slide because I should have introduced them. So my colleague on the left side of my screen, Matthew Kenny, teaches, one of the courses he teaches is human biology. And my colleague on the right side of my screen is Amanda Karch, who directs our workforce engagement and community education. And they're just, as you can see, they're a ton of fun. And we were trapped on a train basically for 8 hours together until we finally arrived to the University of Maryland. And the conversation on the train turned from us sort of looking at our screens, catching up on email and grading, to Professor Kenny's human bio course that he was trying to revamp and revise this academic year. And one of the amazing assignments that he was trying to rethink and reframe an assessment, he wanted to make it more interactive, and he wants to see drastic improvements in student outcomes for this particular really high stakes course for many of our nursing students and medical assisting students. So we spent several hours just talking about his class, what his goals were for the class, and some ideas that he was just tossing around to rethink his assessments. And we were here. And, you know, we really had a great conference. Also pictured here is our Dean of Students, Drew Ledoux. So it was a great, like, just group of us sort of brainstorming our courses and our students and new technologies and really building that rural resiliency. So the outcome, why I share this story, is we sort of used our time thinking about Professor Kenny's course and thinking more about promising practices that we heard about at this conference in particular with regard to AI. And I've just identified here some of the key areas that were discussed with grading and feedback, enhanced accessibility and inclusivity in courses, adaptive learning and personalized assessments, which for many of us using Brightspace as our digital learning environment, you know, we're already sort of doing that in non-AI ways with replacement strings and different tools that we now have available. More on that later. Plagiarism detection and academic integrity, things like Turnitin, insights for assessment overall. And then what resonated with me is time for teaching and learning, because I just think it feels like so much of the semester is just this rush. And I want to try to do more with less, more impactful assessments, more memorable ones. And that was exactly what my colleague, Matthew Kenny, was also trying to do. So it was really a great chance to rethink and reframe and just sort of ground my thoughts on this topic in what my real role in the classroom is to work with students and make this content amazing and empower students with things that they can take away from my classes and apply into whatever their career paths or goals are. Many of the classes that I teach are U.S. history, civic engagement, DEISJ, they're gen ed classes. And then, you know, occasionally, maybe the 200 levels smattered here and there on more specific topics. So I thought, what would happen if I sort of flip this perspective and start to model critical thinking, curiosity, and reflection as I use some of these tools, pilot them, try them out, and guide students to do the same. And one of the really helpful tools that I found was allowing me to unlock this as I, you know, rethought some courses that I was trying to refresh and update, even going back to like 2012, was this Bloom's Taxonomy Revisited. And this is actually a tool that is shared through Oregon State University. And I'm using Bloom's all the time in my role as assessment coordinator with faculty to sit down and sort of think about, for new courses or revision of courses, how to use this to develop learning outcomes or even assignments and map and connect those, their assessment methods. what I love about this is it takes Bloom's and it allows you to use this as a reference and prioritize making changes aligned to your course activities and assessments in light of AI tools and capabilities. And it's sort of comparing the human brain, the AI brain, or the AI capabilities. This has been a really helpful conversation starter, a tool to share with divisions who are, working through program reviews and curricular revisions, even in thinking through new course development. So with this tool, it's a great starting point, but I think with any of this work, it's really important to think through carefully some of these questions, like how will this particular assignment help students really learn this content, develop important skills, and meet these learning goals that I have set forth? How can I be intentional about how students are applying these skills, in their paths, whether it's career or coursework? In what ways will this assignment or activity further their understanding and also their experience with some of these tools? And why does that matter, especially specific to my content or my colleagues? And what questions or barriers do we anticipate that students may encounter? And these can be good sort of thought-provoking questions at faculty meetings or department meetings, or even just one or two of these in conversations with colleagues. So it was really about being intentional. So I want to share some examples with all of this being said of how we applied these practices and principles and things that we learned at this conference to actual work that we're doing at the college. And that starts always sort of with the end in mind for us with the development of learning outcomes. So I just included an actual example of inputting some information into ChatGPT here with regard to existing learning outcomes that I had for a US history course. And they were pretty bare minimum. Like there were 2 learning outcomes. And I don't love the demonstrate understanding, the 2, sort of action verbs. Like these needed work and revision. So sometimes like I and colleagues, right, we sit there thinking about these learning outcomes and you're having some sort of like analysis paralysis or trouble getting started. So it's a great way to just say, okay, take these existing learning outcomes, even here is my course description that's going to be unchanged. And I'm going to ask ChatGPT to revise these to be more equitable and include some additional civic engagement outcome pieces here. So in, 3.2 seconds, like I got some results and here were the results, which I liked a lot better. And I think, some takeaways in just doing this basic activity is to be as specific as possible with the instructions, review these with colleagues. I don't think these are the end all, right? But they're a good starting point to revise and go from there. And making sure that whatever we come up with, we map and align to our institutional outcomes and our program outcomes. And maybe it can be an interesting activity in a more departmental setting to even look at those program outcomes and see what is generated. I mean, these things can take such a long time to do. We're used to doing them, but to enhance our work through technology was pretty cool, especially with faculty who were a little bit resistant to some of the assessment like drudgery work. It was like, wow, this is pretty cool. Beyond learning outcomes, we also considered building assessment activities and assignments, and we started with just brainstorming some of this. again, working with ChatGPT with some prompts and questions related to our particular course content and our learning goals. And actually, Professor Kenny, who I introduced you to earlier in the presentation, had an idea for an assignment that he wanted to do with regard to forest bathing in his human bio class. He wanted to provide students with an immersive experience so that they could go out into the woods that are all around our college, which sits on 100 acres next to Olana, and test out the effects of that on their blood pressure rates and their overall stress rates. And he wanted to build in that immersive assignment to his course. And I thought it was a great idea. But we were able to use this AI tool to really break down what could be a very complex assignment into simplified, easy to understand instructions. And then I'll talk a little bit later about, the rubric development of that assignment and activity. So it can be helpful as a starting point to brainstorm activities that seem unwieldy to try to create, and to customize and adapt what is put out by AI to tailor to your specific students' needs and your course content, with you being the end all. So here's another example sort of related to that, using ChatGPT, designing an assessment activity. I asked the AI tool to align those previous outcomes to one activity in that US history course, and to assess the third outcome, which was actually more of a DEI-SJ outcome. And in a couple of seconds, maybe like 10 or 12, what popped up was a potential activity that I could examine, review, revise, maybe use seeds of as an idea. And it was kind of pretty cool, kind of actually related to a project that I was already doing in this class. But now I sort of had another perspective on how I could rethink and reframe with greater intentionality this particular project. So again, the tips in doing this are to be specific, address diverse student learning styles. I have, again, if I have a class of 35 students, they're all in really, really different places, many different learning styles. I want to be sensitive to that. And then whatever is, created, to revise and customize within the framework of my intended assignment to suit my particular teaching style and content. So for example, here, it's asking students to collaboratively design. Maybe I thought about this or envisioned this as more of an individual project, which then students would present out more collaboratively, something like that. Okay, so another common thing, especially teaching online as an assessment tool, are discussion boards. And I shared a resource to find out more about this, but you can ask AI to help you create asynchronous online, or maybe you're doing a discussion board in a hybrid class for your course. And the more specific you can be, as in this example with the instructions that you put in, the better quality you will get out. And you can even start to think about criteria for meeting or exceeding expectations on this assignment, which will lead us into a discussion on the assessment side of providing feedback to students. So some tips, again, when thinking about this, are to be really clear in learning objectives, to provide that data and information if you're going to use AI, with measurable, really student-centered objectives. And I think it's always important in discussion boards to really make them spaces where there's not one right answer, so that there's a lot of critical thinking, a lot of open analysis. And I think it's also great in the beginning to plan AI resistant, as we call, discussions or assignments, where you're asking students to reflect on personal experiences that require their own out-of-the-box sort of analysis of recent events, like current events in my case, or experiences that they've had in their lives, which are unique that they might be willing to share. This can also be really helpful in prompts for replies and discussion posts and boards. Okay, so another really common place where we're doing this is in entry tickets. And I just figured I would share one of the most basic but most powerful entry ticket style assessments that I do in Western Civ course is I ask students to, like, week 1, develop a recipe and give them like an actual card for a civilization in history courses. And I will ask them to reflect on or just list out what specific ingredients are required to build a civilization. Now, with AI or using technology to enhance my teaching or the course, I'll still do this activity, but then I'll sort of gauge students' engagement, and I'll ask them to share, their ingredients, which are pretty similar or derived from the textbook reading that they're doing. So we'll sort of pull up maybe on one screen AI tool, and we'll ask it what ingredients are required to build a civilization. And it's kind of a great opportunity, I think, for me to model a really basic prompt to something like ChatGPT. And it's a great conversation starter when we're doing these entry tickets, which kick off a lesson on any given topic, sort of those open-ended questions that can be enhanced through technology. And I think the best possible situation, if we can empower our classes, our students, to think of our work and time together in a class as a team, we're able to really integrate this technology effectively. So what some of my colleagues are doing is actually appointing AI writers, students in a class, as researchers to, at any given time, like in a lecture or an activity, to prompt students to engage with AI on a topic being discussed. And whatever results they get back is great points for discussion to compare some of the latest academic research or what they're reading or hearing in the news with what results are generated from AI. And this can be a whole class or group discussion. I was doing this recently, a few weeks ago, in the end of one of my courses, when we were talking about a student was fascinated with Homer and sort of Greek writing and philosophy and literature. So we were asking it questions and sort of engaging with some of the limitations of what results we were getting back with the AI tools. So this is another important sort of thing that's sweeping Columbia Green Community College, is using tools like ChatGPT to create rubrics. So often we're using a rubric library and sort of retrofitting an existing rubric, but it's amazing how quickly and efficiently a pretty solid rubric can be generated when you have clear criteria, clear descriptions. And so I thought I would share just an example of the same assignment that I've been showing you in that US history course, where you can then customize the rubric with your criteria and descriptions that are best for your courses and students, change the point scale. We did this with Professor Kenny's assignment and course, and what we started with really wasn't what we finished with, but it provided like a starting point and a framework, and it saved us a lot of time, especially working on his more complex, multifaceted assignment in human bio. I think it's really important to be, again, specific and detailed in your instructions. This really was a theme in our panel discussion with the AI experts, and to carefully review the end results, because we know that there's bias, all kinds of biases and limitations with these tools, like any other tools. So in the end of the day, your human brain and expertise and judgment that goes into rubric creation as the final product is the important thing. And absolutely critical to our work this year, this semester, one of our strategic initiatives, something that we are really heavily assessing is equity and engaging diverse learners. So one way to also think about this out of a teaching side, more into a learning side, are to use AI tools that are free and accessible. That's pretty much why I'm using ChatGPT a lot in this space. Students don't even need to create an account, like it's free, it's pretty accessible. Are knowledge checks. So you can just ask, you can show your students how to ask an AI tool to test their knowledge or to review or to create a game, even if they like studying that way, on any given topic. So in this case, I just chose ancient civilizations, and there's an interplay. So it will say like, sure, what civilization do you want to think about? So in this case, I put in Rome, and there were some good sort of review questions that came up. So this is kind of I think a creative, low stakes way to expose students to this technology and get them using it in positive ways to review your course material. Another outside of ChatGPT thing that I've been doing a lot is gamifying courses, which iCivics is a tool that was actually, or it's a group that was created by Supreme Court Justice and then sort of evolved into gamifying content specific to civics. iCivics is not strictly an AI tool. However, when students, even if they use a free account, there's like dozens of games that they can play to test any kind of knowledge like grassroots politics or breaking down federalism. It's smart in the sense that it uses anything that they might miss or anything lacking or like steps that are skipped to build the next experience for them. So there's a little bit of an AI piece to some of the games, and these are really helpful for review, formative assessment, feedback, and just overall engaging students. The other thing is just sort of being mindful of the power of personalized feedback. So any kind of AI-powered assessment tools, think basic, Grammarly, all the way up to, more expensive tools that can analyze student performance data and provide personalized feedback or learning plans. I think this is a space that we're hoping to investigate more and, pilot or try or implement as well. I think at the most basic non-AI level, we can do this simply in Brightspace, right? By an announcement using replacement strings that says, hi, Bob, how are you? Welcome to this course. And we know that that engages students and retains them and leads to better outcomes. But it's great to think about how AI can be used to do this. And even with basic objective assessments, instantaneous grading, recognition of any questions missed. And then if you're open to allowing students another opportunity to take that exam or assessment or quiz on material where they can improve, that's very, very powerful. So being mindful of our time together, I wanted to just talk about over the course of the year, some of the takeaways that we have found. One being transparency. So just, I don't want to think about words of caution, but, realistically, how can we integrate this in the best possible way? And I think the first thing is to be clear that we're using technology to enhance courses in ways that we are, having open discussions with colleagues and students about how these tools are being used in classes. And this includes everything from identifying, some colleges identify approved AI tools versus tools that are not allowed to be used in both teaching and learning. So if we're clear about that, I think it demystifies and, definitely empowers faculty and students. And I think having options are always a good thing. So students fairly may be uncomfortable creating accounts or using AI applications given realistic privacy and security concerns. So if integrating AI into these assignments or any learning activity, I think having options or avoiding requiring it to be used is a good or smart thing. And providing alternatives is great. The second and equally most important thing is about fairness and critical thinking. So always addressing data privacy and any security related concerns. I think all of this is good information literacy for students, but also faculty alike. I definitely had at the beginning of the year this moment where I felt like I needed to put my own oxygen on first, and really experiment and dabble and try this. And it was messy before integrating it into the classroom or working with faculty. So I'm going to share some resources that are helpful in doing this work as well. Another takeaway, though, is feedback. So getting feedback from students and others about their experiences, saving this feedback somewhere. We actually developed a Brightspace course that faculty have access to, and we have some different discussion threads where faculty and adjuncts can post their experiences in real time, and we're learning from all of this as it's evolving. And with this, always considering digital equity, such as access to technologies whenever they're used for teaching and learning, is so important. For me to assume that all of my students are connected or have access to this technology, would just be an oversight. So just thinking about those basics first have been really important. And, the hope, I think, is to not feel in that murky ground between utopia or dystopia, but to feel informed and empowered and have a clear path of what we're hoping to do. I have to put a plug out. I'm a proud Fact2 member. So I think that this publication was a game changer for me and in conversation on my campus. The Fact2 Guide to Optimizing AI in Higher Education. So I really want to thank and shout out to those who took time to think this through and to put out this resource. And also a great, again, kind of jumping off point for me was the navigating assessment in the digital era, which was a pretty lengthy and in-depth, very informative panel discussion that the SUNY Council on Assessment put together with AI experts in their respective areas. So the link to that, it's on YouTube recorded. I will share with all. So I did really want to save some time to connect with everyone here and just open it up to questions, conversation, and things that are on all of your minds.
There's been a pretty lively discussion happening in the chat, Nikki, and it got kicked off by Heidi Andrade, who talked about her experience with AI generated rubrics being much too generic and useful to students, and that they're fine for grading but not useful instructional tools. And that kicked off kind of a whole bunch of comments and challenges for specific instructional contexts and so forth. So I'm wondering if you wouldn't want to talk a little bit more about that, or maybe Heidi or anyone who was posting in the chat, if you want to unmute and clarify, you know, your comment or your question.
Yeah, I would love to hear more about people's experiences, and I'll definitely speak more about it, but give someone else an opportunity to weigh in.
I'll just restate what I said in my comment, which is that I'm a confessed expert in rubrics, and so I was very curious about what Claude or ChatGPT or something could do with them, and was pretty consistently disappointed, right? So they were very much about grading and very measurement oriented, and not something. I'm a formative assessment person, so I really wanted them to be instructional tools. And so the one I saw you share was much more specific than anything that I generated. So I wondered how you were able to get something that looked like it might actually be informative for students.
Agreed. So I think first, to your point, it's so important to have that expertise, those colleagues to think through like assignment creation and providing feedback to students. And without a doubt, I think like in my utopia, every assignment would have a rubric, right? And they don't, you know. So we were, you know, in my work with Professor Kenny, who I shared, who was trying to create a really elaborate assignment, and he is not and he's okay if I share this, like as an example, he is not a rubric expert. He's really immersed in his science and in his content and providing recitation and support for students, but the rubric piece was lacking. So to have a starting point for him to just input like as many specifics as we could about how he envisioned the assignment. In addition, we added his course learning objective that we wanted this assignment to connect to when we did our work with him. That was really helpful. Our results were much better when we did that, connecting it to Bloom's, but not only that, to his course learning outcome was game changing. In the example that I shared here for the US history, I included the course description and the learning outcome, again, that I wanted it to connect to, and that was the result that I shared. I would not use that as my end result. I would go back and revise and rethink and reword and reframe, but it was kind of cool to have a sample to work off of in the beginning.
Yeah. Okay. So the message I'm getting is, don't just say, make a rubric about something. Say, make a rubric about something that reflects these learning objectives for the lesson, the unit, the project, whatever. That's good advice.
Definitely. Or applied skill that this specific activity is supposed to do. And then definitely your levels of emergent to proficient or exceeding. And the more information, I think, the better.
Right. That's a great example of prompt engineering, as Alexandra pointed out. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Heidi. Thanks, Nikki. Meg D has her hand raised. Meg?
Hi there. Thanks for the opportunity to ask a question. And I don't mean to get off on a different tangent too much, but you had mentioned at the beginning that the implications for integrating with Brightspace. In University of Buffalo, all of us were now using Brightspace for the coming up on 2 years. So if you could comment more on that, it would be helpful.
Yeah, so I mean, for us anyway, navigating, we were cohort 1 transition to Brightspace from Blackboard. And there was just so little opportunity, I'll say, in Blackboard to design courses that had much personalized feedback at all. So now that we're in Brightspace, we have many, many more options to integrate external tools, and B, just use the basic tools that already exist to provide personalized feedback, whether that's inline grading annotations, audio feedback, visual feedback, more robust rubrics. Like the rubrics were so simple that we were able to post in Blackboard. So now we're able to make a much more robust feedback space on assignments or discussions or any graded activity for that matter in Brightspace. Even just objective assessments like quizzes, the quiz tool, multiple attempts, instant feedback, all of the settings we're just finding is game changing, let alone exploring more opportunities for customized learning plans that could be built in. Those would be add-ons, of course.
So I see that Dr. Sargianis has his hand up. Do you want to unmute and talk?
Yeah, hi, thanks. My name is Demetrius. I couldn't change my name for some reason. I have that up for the students. I have a question about using or having the students use AI to actually write a paper. So I have an assignment in the fall where I have my technology students write a research paper on a particular material that they choose. And I was thinking of giving them an option where they actually use AI to write the paper, and then they have to go through and sort of critique that paper and fact check it. Is that something you've had any experience with? And I'm wondering if you have, what type of recommendations you'd have in terms of trying to manage that and making sure they're actually getting something out of it.
Yeah, so in my own classes, I don't have students do that, but I have several English faculty colleagues who actually one is designing an ethics and writing class as we speak over the summer. But he's been having students do something that sounds really similar to what you're doing and is using that to help them improve their own writing, their research, their citation skills. We use Turnitin as an integration in Brightspace. So it's part of actually their CE 101 college experience class to learn how to use Turnitin, how to avoid or how to embrace academic integrity and create original work and how to read those reports. So I feel like anything like that would be important scaffolding instead of just unleashing them into the world of technology and AI to say, okay, like here's language of how you can identify all of these different things. What is contract cheating? What is wrong with just copying and pasting something from ChatGPT into a paper? Like those would be important, I think, building activities before the Wild West of just here you are.
Yeah, I guess I'm just trying to get ahead of, I know someone last year used AI, and I'm just trying to figure out, is there a way I can give them the option to either write it on their own or use it, just kind of take it off the table, right? Tell them you can use it, but you need to go through and do the research and support the paper on your own, right? Make sure it's correct. Because a lot of these students they're in their final year, they're going to go off into industry, and they're probably going to use AI as like a quick way to find facts and information about various things. So
I think that's exactly it. I think it's a great idea because if you're not exposing them to it, like what kind of disservice is that into their actual lives or their workspaces? So the classroom, I think, can be a great place to try it and use it.
I'll let you know how it goes. Thank you.
Next presentation.
I'm scanning the chat. There's a bunch of stuff going on in the chat, Nikki. Let me just see. If anyone has a question specific and wants to come off mute, please go ahead.
And also to that point about using it for teaching, just using it on your own, like I think you can read you can very quickly pick up what is AI text versus, a student writing in many cases. Sometimes it's harder, but even not using Turnitin. So just the more
I have a
We're having
question.
a big discussion in here right now. I'm sorry, Lisa. I can
Very
wait.
quick, if I use ChatGPT to write my learning objectives on my syllabus, how would I cite that? Would I write these objectives were crafted with the help of ChatGPT?
Thank you for that question, Lisa. I will post, so actually University of Oregon does a really good job in their teaching and learning center, providing examples of how to cite anything, from AI. So I can post that resource.
Great, thank you.
We're having a chat right now about our students using ChatGPT or other AI to fully write their essays and not go through the recursive writing process that is required in most comp classes or other English classes. They put minimal effort into their process work so that it's less noticeable, or they think it is. And in some of our schools, they've allowed Turnitin for plagiarism checkers, but have turned off the AI checker, understandably, because it picks up Grammarly and other things. But a human didn't write it. I don't want to fault a student. There's one that's going to court right now. I don't want to fault a student who used AI in the right way. But at the same time, I have a student I did fail for using AI and not coming to chat with me about it. And I teach entirely online, so I don't have a lot of vocal one-on-one with my students. It's all typed out. Is there some way that we can have more, I don't know, video interaction about AI use in SUNY schools?
I mean, I think that would be great. I have to say that at my community college, we're developing our policies, and I feel like it is dynamic and quickly evolving. I also teach for Excelsior University. They have, that's fully online, so I can relate to that a little bit more there. And some of the standards, like they use Turnitin as well, have been updated to only flag 70% or higher on like a Turnitin AI checker. So it is evolving.
Can I jump in here though? Because I have a student who just wrote a paper on this, and I found it really illuminating. This is not a new problem. So AI is just a twist on the problem. And so a lot of the standard approaches still apply. So you put in your syllabus what your stance is, and my stance is you can use AI, but you must cite it. If you use Grammarly, you must cite it, and you must say what you used it for. And we're just making up a way to cite things at this point, but that's fine. I mean, Claudine Gay just got pitched out of Harvard for supposedly plagiarizing something when she was in grad school, right? So my students really need to learn this stuff. So you put it in your syllabus, whether it's okay or not okay. And I hope it's okay just the way a calculator is okay in math class. That's my stance. You can use it. You just
Thank you. I said the same thing.
right? It's just a new tool. And if we try to prevent them from using it, we'll go crazy because we can't prevent them. We'll be totally focused on the wrong thing in our instruction. So teach them I'm teaching my students how to use it. I'm teaching them how to cite it. And I'm teaching them how to be really critical about what it produces. And I think if we don't do that, right, standard syllabus language, and maybe even, you know, for any kind of academic integrity thing, you have students sign something that says, I will, you know, follow the rules in the syllabus. That actually seems to make a difference, which is incredible to me. So a lot of it is just old procedures to prevent plagiarism that help us as instructors not go nuts trying to catch students using the tool that is free for them to use in order to learn better.
Heidi, would you mind sharing your how to cite this stuff in an essay?
Oh, sure. We just made it up.
Yeah, that's fine. That would be great.
Okay, because I have to sign off, I'll just tell you, all right?
Uh-huh.
I had them put a note, like an author's note. And
Oh, okay.
it says this, the grammar of this essay was checked with Grammarly, or the structure of this essay was informed by Claude or ChatGPT or something like that. And so right up front, there's a note that says what tool they used and what they used it for.
What tool and for what purpose?
And I find, and then if I'm really worried about it, like if it's a class on writing, I will have them put in an appendix what the AI tool produced. And then I see what AI did and I see what they did. And because they're graduate students, it's not a
Oh,
big,
see, you're a little higher, but that's okay.
right? So, but I'm learning with them, and I taught
Yes.
this too. It's important, right? Put your own oxygen mask on first. So we're just making it up as we go along, but I'm being really transparent about it and encouraging them to use the tool in a transparent way and to show me how to use it.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I want to thank Dr. Childrose for the very engaging and informative presentation. Thank you, Nikki, and thank you, everyone who took your lunch with us today. I'm very happy to see you all. I popped a link in the chat for the recordings and registration of all of our SUNY Online Teaching webinar series for this spring of 2024, and the recording for this session will be posted as soon as it renders. We have another presentation this week on engaging students in online math-related courses coming up tomorrow. So I want to invite you to come back tomorrow to be with us for that. The link that I posted in the chat is both for the recordings and to register. So if you haven't registered yet for the one tomorrow, you can register at that same link. And there on the screen are the list of all the sessions that we did this semester. And so again, thank you to Nikki, and thanks to everyone for joining us. Thank you, Lynn Ann, for your assistance. Appreciate you, and have a great rest of your day, everybody. Thank you, Nikki. Great job.
Thank you. I will email materials.
Yeah,
Thanks.
that'd be great. So we can post it with your recording. And if you want to grab a copy of the chat so that you can, peruse that in more detail and see what people were talking about. It was very engaging and very lively back and forth conversation going on in there. And so really happy to have had you come and do this session and talk about all your experiences and all your information. So that was awesome. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you.
Thank you again. Bye.
Bye-bye.